Business Book Summaries.
Another day, another book, but this one is game-changing. Today's book is a captivating read titled Influence. What makes it even more intriguing is that Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's trusted advisor, is a big fan of this book. Its popularity is nothing short of astounding. It has been translated into 26 languages, sold 2 million copies worldwide, and earned a place among Fortune magazine's 75 smartest books to read.
Before we delve further, remember that we regularly share new content. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel Business Book Summaries and hit the notification bell for the latest updates.
The acclaim for this book comes from its remarkable insights into the science behind the mechanisms that influence our decisions, rooted deeply in psychology. Initially, I was drawn to the book by its title, imagining that it might empower me to emulate influential figures like Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. However, the reality turned out to be a humbling reminder that such influence isn't easily attained. At its core, the book demystifies how we are swayed by delving into various psychological principles, offering insights on how to navigate and resist these influences. Many people believe they are impervious to psychological tactics, a sentiment initially shared by the author, Robert Cialdini. He is an emeritus professor of psychology at Arizona State University and a former president of a prestigious psychology society. One might assume that, as an experienced psychologist, he'd be more likely to influence others than be influenced himself. However, Cialdini realized that even he wasn't immune to everyday persuasions, such as unwittingly subscribing to unwanted magazines or buying tickets to events he had no interest in. This realization led him on a quest for understanding, immersing himself in various roles, including that of a salesperson and an advertiser, to observe firsthand the forces that drive compliance. Cialdini's extensive field research ultimately led to a groundbreaking discovery. Most persuasive tactics can be distilled into 6 foundational categories, each stemming from a basic psychological principle that drives human behavior. This exploration culminated in the creation of the influential book Influence. The book revolves around 6 fundamental principles: reciprocity, commitment, and consistency, social proof, liking, authority, and scarcity. It offers a deep dive into how our actions are often manipulated, supported by rich case studies and sharp psychological insights. Reading through it, you'll uncover the tricks and tactics that are common in daily life. While the book may not turn you into a genius, it certainly aims to make you more discerning and less gullible. Before delving into these 6 principles, the book introduces a critical concept: fixed action patterns. Understanding this concept is key to grasping how these principles work. So, what exactly are fixed action patterns? Let's consider the example of turkeys, often featured in Christmas feasts. Female turkeys are fiercely protective of their chicks, primarily triggered by the chick's distinctive cheeping sound. The absence of this sound might lead to neglect or even accidental harm to the chicks. An interesting experiment with turkeys involved an inflatable toy that emitted chick sounds. The mother turkey, upon hearing these sounds from the toy, immediately adopted a nurturing stance. This pattern isn't unique to turkeys. For instance, peacocks, known for their courtship displays, react similarly to tourists wearing bright clothes. Such automatic, mechanical behavioral patterns are widespread in the animal kingdom, and we refer to them as fixed action patterns, almost like pre-recorded tapes in an animal's system, activated with the push of a button. Humans also have similar patterns, although ours are mostly learned rather than innate. Throughout our development, various psychological buttons get embedded in us, ready to be triggered. Understanding and triggering these buttons can significantly influence our behavior, often to someone else's advantage. Cialdini illustrates this with the contrast principle in cognition, which implies that when we encounter 2 items with stark differences, one after the other, we tend to amplify their dissimilarities in our perception. For instance, lifting a light object followed by a heavy one makes the second object seem heavier than it really is. This subtle yet powerful principle finds its way into numerous aspects of our daily lives. There's a well-known humorous story about buying a car that illustrates this principle. It begins with someone tired of commuting on an electric bike, facing the summer heat and winter cold, who decides to buy a car for 150,000 yuan. Initially considering a Volkswagen Golf, they find it slightly cramped and without any discounts. So, they contemplate a Volkswagen Tiguan, thinking the extra cost is marginal. Then they hear about the Magaton, priced similarly but offering more space, and decide on it. But when calculating the final price, however, a glimpse at the BMW 3 Series at a dealership changes their mind, and suddenly their budget has escalated to around 350,000 yuan. This scenario demonstrates the contrast principle at play. In car dealerships, salespeople often start by showing a basic model and then a more expensive one. The contrast makes the basic model seem less appealing and the pricier one more attractive, leading to an escalated budget decision. This illustrates how the fixed action patterns in our psychology work. We have a sort of psychological play button that, when pressed by specific triggers, leads us to respond instinctively and comply, often without realizing it. The contrast principle is just one prime example, challenging our preparedness to handle such manipulative strategies, even as rational individuals. Let's dive into the first tactic, the principle of reciprocity. This principle revolves around the idea that when someone does us a favor, we often feel a sense of obligation to return the favor. For example, if a friend gives you a book as a birthday gift, you're likely to feel the urge to give them a gift on their birthday in return. This principle is deeply ingrained in our culture, as evidenced by sayings like "one good turn deserves another," and "it is more blessed to give than to receive." In social circles, people who constantly take without giving back are generally not well regarded. However, this very principle of reciprocity is often exploited for personal gain. Consider the warm service you receive in a retail store. After trying on several outfits with the assistance of the store staff, you might feel compelled to make a purchase. This is an exploitation of the reciprocity principle. Moreover, reciprocity can manifest not only as direct reciprocation, but also as reciprocal concessions. This strategy is similar to the start high, then go low approach. In daily life, bargaining is a classic example of this strategy. A seller might initially quote a high price, say $100, expecting the customer to reject it. Then, the seller pretends to make a concession by lowering the price during negotiations. Eventually, a deal is reached at a middle ground price that leaves both parties satisfied. The seller makes a sale, and the customer feels like they've secured a bargain. Expanding upon the rejection, then retreat principle, we encounter the compromise effect in behavioral economics. This effect was demonstrated in an experiment involving orange juice. Initially, there were two choices, orange juice A for $12 and orange juice B for $25, with consumers almost evenly divided between them. However, when a third option, orange juice C for $58, approximately 70% chose option B, 20% chose option A, and 10% chose option C, significantly boosting the business's sales. This phenomenon, where people prefer the middle option when uncertain, is known as the compromise effect. It reflects our tendency to choose a safer middle ground option to avoid making major mistakes. Does this mean we are completely at the mercy of the reciprocity principle? Not necessarily. There are two effective ways to say no. First, you can outright refuse initial gestures or concessions to avoid getting caught up in these situations. However, distinguishing between genuine kindness and ulterior motives can be challenging, and rejecting genuine kindness may hurt someone's feelings. The second, more effective strategy is to accept proposals that you genuinely agree with and ignore those with ulterior motives. Understanding how the reciprocity principle works, especially when businesses use it for their advantage, is crucial. While it's important to recognize and appreciate acts of kindness, we should also consider the motives and context behind these actions. Now, let's move on to the principle of commitment and consistency. Imagine you have a common goal, like losing weight. The typical advice is to eat less and move more. However, Cialdini suggests taking it a step further. Write down your goal and share it with as many people as possible. This taps into our innate desire for consistency in our actions and words, because nobody wants to undermine their credibility. In China, the principle of commitment and consistency is vividly illustrated in the real estate market. Before buying a house, many people firmly believe that prices will drop. However, once they make a down payment, their outlook shifts dramatically. They start believing in the perpetual rise of property prices in cities like Beijing and Shanghai. This change in attitude is driven by the pressure to remain consistent with their decisions. We often deceive ourselves to justify past choices. Before buying, we convince ourselves that prices will fall, making not buying the right choice. After buying, we persuade ourselves that prices are at a low point and delaying the purchase would be regrettable. Similarly, in behavioral economics, this is further explained by loss aversion in behavioral finance, where the fear of losing something makes people overvalue their possessions. The discomfort from potential loss often feels greater than the pleasure from equivalent gains. The principle of commitment and consistency has a significant impact on our behavior. Once we commit to something or take a stand, we tend to automatically align our actions with that commitment. People even adjust their self-image to match how others perceive them after making a commitment. We believe what we write down and tend to align our self-image with it, influencing our actions accordingly. This tendency is often exploited by others for their own objectives. For example, many companies require their sales staff to set written sales targets, using the principle of commitment and consistency to exert psychological pressure. This is similar to the reason behind publicly announcing plans, like weight loss goals. Written commitments carry more weight than verbal ones, and public commitments are even more binding. The more effort you invest in a commitment, the greater its impact on you, and the less likely you are to abandon it. For instance, a friend of mine committed to updating her public account every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday for 2 years. She felt compelled to continue this routine to uphold her image of reliability, regardless of her workload. This phenomenon shows that people tend to value things they've worked hard for more than things obtained easily. The principle of commitment and consistency is also exploited by shaping our image to be favorable and beneficial, making us conform to demands consistent with this image. This can lead us to feel as though the choice was ours, a tactic commonly known as buttering up. Now let's delve into the principle of commitment and consistency further. Imagine someone wants to ask you for a favor. Before they make their request, they might remind you of how generous and helpful you've been in the past. This subtle tactic implies that you'd be stingy or inconsistent if you were to refuse their request. Another method that exploits the commitment and consistency principle is the low-ball technique, as mentioned by Cialdini. Here's how it works. Car dealers might offer customers an exceptionally low price when they show interest in a car. Once the customer commits and starts the buying process, the dealer engages them in activities that foster a personal commitment to the purchase. However, when it's time to finalize the dealer reintroduces the previously omitted costs, often resulting in a price increase. Surprisingly, many customers still proceed with the purchase to maintain consistency with their initial commitment. This raises an important question. Are we powerless in such scenarios? Ralph Waldo Emerson once criticized foolish consistency, and our author echoes this sentiment. To counter the influence of commitment and consistency, we must recognize that while consistency can be positive, we must avoid blind rigidity. We should be cautious of automatically maintaining consistency without thoughtful consideration. Additionally, we need to be careful when accepting small requests, as they can often lead to larger commitments later on. Moreover, we should reflect on our decisions, considering if we would make the same choice now, knowing what we face. It's important to understand that maintaining consistency is unnecessary if it was coerced or manipulated by others. True commitments should come from within. Now let's explore the principle of social proof, which essentially means following the lead of the majority. Sometimes, this blind conformity can have disastrous consequences. A stark example occurred in 1964 in New York when Kitty Genovese, a young woman in her 20s, was fatally attacked over half an hour while 38 neighbors witnessed the attack from their windows. Shockingly, None of them intervened or called the police. Psychologists attribute this to the presence of numerous bystanders, which often reduces the likelihood of individual intervention in emergencies. This happens for two reasons. First, the perceived shared responsibility among witnesses lessens individual guilt, and second, in emergencies, people often freeze, unsure of how to act. They look to others for cues on how to respond, illustrating the powerful influence of social proof. Social proof suggests that in situations of uncertainty, ambiguity, or overwhelming circumstances, we tend to assume that the actions of others are correct. An example from my studies in Chongqing involves twisted strip shops in Sikh ancient town. Despite many similar shops offering tastings, one particular shop with consistently long lines stood out. There were rumors that the shop paid people to line up, yet tourists, unfamiliar with the area, tended to flock to this crowded shop. This demonstrates the effectiveness of social proof. This phenomenon is similar to what we see at popular milk tea shops and restaurants, with long lines. Joining these lines, you might finally try the product and find it underwhelming, realizing the flawed assumption that a crowded store signifies quality. This is where uncertainty plays a significant role in the power of social proof. In unfamiliar environments, people are more prone to follow the crowd. Another crucial aspect of social proof is similarity. We are most influenced by the behavior of those we perceive as similar to ourselves. A concerning example of social proof under the condition of similarity is the rise in suicide rates following high-profile media coverage. Sociologist David Phillips found that in the U.S., suicides increased by an average of 58% following front-page suicide news. This phenomenon, known as the Werther effect, shows that media portrayal of suicides can prompt similar individuals to follow suit. Beyond these serious instances, consider the commercial streets in your hometown dedicated to specific types of businesses. These districts harness the power of social proof, instinctively drawing us in when we seek those particular products or services. From the cases we've discussed, it's evident that our reaction to social proof can be unconscious and reflex-like. This means that even skewed or fabricated evidence can deceive us. So, how can we resist such manipulation? Cialdini believes that recognizing false data is the best defense against the drawbacks of the social proof principle. This requires thorough research, whether it's for travel or shopping. Being well prepared is crucial. We must also stay alert to obviously flawed data, such as street interviews, that seem to randomly select people to discuss their experiences with a product. In reality, these individuals may not be actual consumers, but selectively chosen or even hired actors. This creates a false impression of widespread and positive usage, leading viewers to believe in the product's effectiveness. Businesses often exploit social proof to increase their sales by creating an illusion of popularity. We're not all-knowing, and in unfamiliar settings, we often rely on others' reactions to guide our behavior. This is a protective instinct, but it can also lead to tragic outcomes or be exploited by others. In uncertain environments where everyone's behavior appears unusually uniform, it's wise to question whether following the crowd is truly the right decision. Now, let's move on to the fourth principle, liking. The principle of liking suggests that we are more likely to comply with requests from people we know and like. Many marketers exploit this tendency to promote various products and services. But how exactly is the liking principle used to influence us? Cialdini identifies 5 main factors that come into play. The first factor is physical attractiveness. Unfortunately, attractive people often receive preferential treatment. For example, attractive job applicants are more likely to pass interviews, while less attractive individuals may face rejection. The 1960 U.S. presidential debate between Nixon and Kennedy highlighted this. Radio listeners thought the debate was evenly matched, but TV viewers, influenced by the candidates' physical appearances, favored Kennedy. The second factor is similarity. We naturally like people who are similar to us because it creates a sense of familiarity and security. Similarities in dress, views, backgrounds, interests, lifestyles, or accents can positively influence our reactions. The third factor is flattery. When shopping for clothes, salespeople often compliment customers, regardless of the reality. They might say you look fantastic in a particular outfit, even if it's not true, to win your favor and make the sale. Now, let's take a closer look at the fifth principle, liking. The liking principle suggests that we are more likely to agree with or favor those who flatter us, even when we suspect their flattery might not be entirely sincere. Imagine a scenario where educators excessively praise a child. In such situations, we tend to develop a positive bias towards those who compliment us, even if we are aware that the compliments may not be entirely genuine. The fourth factor influencing the liking principle is contact and cooperation. Interacting and cooperating with someone can turn strangers into familiar faces. For example, a salesperson might create a scenario where they collaborate with you to offer a better deal, thus building rapport and a sense of familiarity. This can make us more inclined to like and trust them, even if the discount isn't realized immediately. The fifth factor is conditioned response and association. For example, when someone boasts about having an accomplished friend, they are implying that their friend's success reflects positively on them, whether it's good or bad. Being linked to something or someone can significantly impact how others perceive us. Businesses often leverage positive associations to influence us. They do this by pairing attractive models with products, using celebrity endorsements, or associating goods with success. To protect ourselves from falling into the liking principle trap, it's important to focus on our feelings of fondness. If you find yourself rapidly and intensely liking someone, be cautious. You might be falling into the trap of the liking principle. Understanding these mechanisms can help us remain vigilant and make more considered choices in our daily lives. Now, let's explore the fifth principle of influence, authority. Authority isn't limited to academic giants or expert scholars. One incident from my middle school days left a deep impression on me. My desk mate was a math whiz, consistently scoring full marks in exams. During one particularly tough final question, I doubted my own answer when I saw that it differed from his. I thought he must be right and copied his answer, only to be reprimanded by the teacher for replicating his mistake. In this scenario, my desk mate was an authority in math, and the idea of him being wrong never occurred to me. This demonstrates the influence of perceived authority. From a young age, we are often conditioned to follow authority figures. When an established authority speaks, other considerations become secondary. Quotes often become famous not because they're profoundly insightful, but because they're uttered by celebrities or recognized authorities. Sometimes, authority doesn't even need to take action. The mere presence of certain symbols can compel compliance. Titles are a key symbol, as they can influence people's behavior more than the actual character of the person. This is why some individuals falsely claim titles like doctor, professor, or CEO to gain compliance. Clothing can also trigger a compliance response, as seen in fraudsters who prefer to wear well-tailored suits. Other symbols of status, such as jewelry and cars, can prompt us to obey authority figures. These external signs amplify an authoritative aura, making us more susceptible to losing our judgment and independence. To protect ourselves from being misled by authority figures, we should ask ourselves two critical questions. First, is this person a true authority? We need to verify both the authenticity of their authority and the relevance of their expertise to the situation at hand. The second question is whether our interests align with those of the authority. The credibility of an authoritative figure can differ based on the context, such as in news versus advertising. It's crucial to consider the nature of the authoritative information presented. Authorities are everywhere, some are genuine, and others are not. The key to dealing with authority is not to be overly humble or rebellious, but to think rationally and avoid blind obedience. This approach helps us navigate situations involving authority effectively. Now, let's turn to the final principle of influence, scarcity. Scarcity refers to the concept that when something is rare or in limited supply, it is often perceived as more valuable. An example of this can be seen in the phenomenon of sneaker flipping, where limited edition sneakers initially priced in the thousands are resold for exponentially higher prices. The idea that rarity increases value significantly influences our perception of an item's worth. This leads to the manipulation of artificial scarcity, which frequently controls our decisions in everyday life. A typical example of artificial scarcity is a final clearance sale only 3 days left. That seems to perpetually extend. Businesses often create scarcity by offering limited editions or time-bound sales, generating a buying frenzy. These strategies inadvertently increase our sense of urgency, shorten our decision-making time, and often lead to impulsive purchases. Another aspect of scarcity's power stems from reactance. When we're restricted from doing something, our desire to do it intensifies. This is illustrated in the tragic story of Romeo and Juliet, whose forbidden love led to dramatic suicides due to their family's opposition. This extreme reaction was likely a result of the forbidden nature of their love, intensified by their family's opposition. The same principle applies to banned movies or books, which become more appealing not because of their quality, but simply because they are prohibited. For instance, labeling a psychology series as a deep dive into 6 banned psychology books immediately creates a more intriguing appeal. Resisting the pull of scarcity is challenging. When we perceive something we desire as becoming unavailable, we are prone to making irrational and impulsive decisions. Cialdini recommends a 2-step response to tackle this challenge. First, recognize when high emotional responses are triggered by scarcity, and use this as a signal to pause and reflect. You can set a mental cue to alert yourself when these impulses arise. Then, question why you want the item. If it's for its functionality, like wearing those sneakers to play basketball, remind yourself that scarcity doesn't make the sneakers improve your skills or the cookies taste better. The best things aren't always the scarcest, but those that suit you best. With this, we near the conclusion of our exploration of influence. Traditional economics assumes that market participants are rational beings capable of making optimal choices. However, developments in psychology and behavioral economics have shown that these rational beings often fail to maintain rationality, given our limited capacity and today's information overload. We sometimes abandon complex decision-making processes for simpler, instinctive reactions. That's why we often rely on principles like reciprocity, commitment and consistency, social proof, liking, authority, and scarcity for automatic decision-making. Humans differ from turkeys in that our automatic responses are acquired, not innate, and can change with our environment. Today, people may be indifferent to perpetual sales, immune to free samples, or see-through dressing room flattery. The examples in influence have become less impactful due to the evolution of marketing strategies and consumer awareness. The main takeaway is that most automatic responses are harmless, designed to reduce decision-making costs. While some may exploit psychological weaknesses for gain, no one is entirely impervious to influence. The purpose of understanding influence isn't to enable manipulation by businesses or consumers, but to encourage self-awareness and a correct consumer mindset. Awareness of these principles is crucial, but without self-reflection and a proper mindset. Therefore, enhancing our knowledge and independent thinking is essential. This is the true purpose of understanding influence, guiding us toward becoming genuinely rational beings.
We're keen to hear your thoughts on our content. Feel free to share your opinions or recommend books in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel Business Book Summaries and hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest summaries. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.